Watchword, Pride and Prejudice, Secret Files Revealed. Written and narrated by C. Taylor. Edited to meet YouTube guidelines. To read the unedited version, please click the link in the description. Chapter 2. The assembly was lively with happy music and excited chatter. Though the eager female attendees outnumbered their less enthusiastic male counterparts, Lizzie smiled to herself. Surely it had nothing to do with the fact that the new wealthy and single resident was confirmed to be attending. What was not confirmed was the number that would be in his party. One story confirmed 5 gentlemen and 7 ladies, others 3 gentlemen, 12 ladies. Either way, it meant there would continue to be too many ladies. Lizzie contented herself with refreshments and happy conversation with anyone who was not excited about the new arrivals. The limitation left only Jane and her very practical friend Charlotte. She also purposely stayed to the back of the room and pulled Jane with her as much as possible. The noisy chatter died down suddenly, and the music faltered, then stopped. Chills ran down Lizzie's spine, knowing that meant the honored guest had finally arrived. Despite her best efforts, she could not resist looking toward the door. The party that just entered was merely 2 ladies and 3 gentlemen. She disregarded the ladies for the moment and analyzed the 3 men for threats. The first was short, disdainful of what he saw at the assembly, red-nosed even from across the room, and clearly was more fashionable than honorable. Someone she would never want to spend any time with, and luckily also didn't seem to be a threat, so there would be no need. The second gentleman was the tallest, broad-shouldered, and very handsome, had a cheery smile, and seemed delighted with the gathering. This must be Mr. Bingley. By all accounts, the man's father had started the family fortune, but the current Mr. Bingley had made the business into a massive success. Would anyone that put so much work into that kind of success find such a simple assembly so exciting? She narrowed her eyes. He might need to be further investigated, and immediately set on a plan to gather more information. The third gentleman nearly took her breath away. Slightly shorter than the second, dark hair, handsome, but it was his eyes. Shockingly warm in color, and scanning the room with almost the same level of disdain as the first gentleman, but with a sharper focus. She could not think as to why, but just the sight of him put every nerve uncomfortably on edge. She had to look away just to get her bearings. The movement sent her swaying slightly. She was being ridiculous. She needed to establish if they were any kind of threat at all to Jane, and neutralize them immediately if so. Childishly swooning over a pretty face would never do. She needed more information. Charlotte's father, Sir Lucas, had been the one to extend the formal invitation to the party, and had called on him more than any of the villagers since they had arrived. Charlotte would possibly have at least some information she could use. She moved to her side with Jane. "Only 2 ladies after all, Charlotte. Do you know who they are?" she asked. "The new resident, Mr. Bingley's sisters, I understand," she explained. "The taller is Caroline, and the shorter is a Mrs. Hurst." "So she is married," Jane interjected. "Yes, to the shorter gentleman. The tallest is Mr. Bingley, and the other is Mr. Bingley's particular friend, Mr. Darcy." "So the taller 2 are not attached?" Jane asked with enough enthusiasm that it put Lizzie's nerves on edge again. "Oh, no, they both have no attachment. They have stated their intent to stay through at least 2 seasons, and Mr. Bingley made it very clear to my father that he would gladly attend any social engagement to which he would be fortunate enough to be invited." Lizzie found this suspect. She also felt especially irritated by Jane's intake of breath. She was not supposed to be attracted to this ever more concerning stranger, but she could tell Jane was much too interested. This had to stop as soon as possible. The shockingly shrill voice of Mrs. Bennet urged both girls to her. The summons caught their attention, but also the attention of more than half the assembly. They both moved to her side before she pulled the attention of the entire room.
"I've just heard it from Mrs. Lucas that Mr. Bingley's friend has 10,000 a year at least. They are even better prospects for you both than I thought,"
She whispered loudly to them.
"Are they not the handsomest men that have ever been seen?"
Lizzie noted Jane flush. She leaned in to whisper softly, "I wonder if they'd be so handsome if they were not so rich." That successfully pulled Jane's attention enough that she laughed softly. Lizzie observed Sir Lucas suddenly look toward Jane. nodded his head at the two taller gentlemen, and they followed him as he moved toward them. Lizzie groaned softly. Sir Lucas bowed to them once he neared. "Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bingley has expressed a wish to become acquainted with you and your daughters." Mrs. Bennet giggled sharply.
"Sir, that is very good of you,"
She greeted before she curtsied with her eldest daughters.
"This is Jane, my eldest."
The blatant joy showing on Mr. Bingley's face as he bowed toward Jane set Lizzie's teeth clenching.
"And this is Elizabeth."
Lizzie forced a soft smile in greeting. He hadn't done anything that would require any of her more brutal skills. Yet.
"And Mary sits over there."
Attention was directed to a small corner of the room where Mary sat quietly, the lively music having no effect on her as her eyes moved disinterestedly around the room.
"And Kitty and Lydia you see are dancing."
The two youngest had yet to sit out a single dance.
"Do you like to dance, sir?"
Mrs. Bennet asked, clearly directing the question and his attention toward Jane and Lizzie. "There is nothing I love better, ma'am, and if Miss Jane Bennet is not otherwise engaged, may I be so bold as to claim the next two dances?" The successful man of trade was indeed amiable. Lizzie could not help but feel he was entirely too amiable. "I am not engaged, sir." Jane's words came soft, but Lizzie felt she was being entirely too eager.
"Sir, you do us great honor. Thank the man, Jane."
Jane smiled serenely, accustomed to Mrs. Bennet's ability to make every interaction excessively uncomfortable. "I thank you, kind sir."
"And you, sir, are you also fond of dancing?"
Mrs. Bennet's shrill voice called to the gentleman standing behind Mr. Bingley. Mr. Bingley finally looked away from Jane and turned. "Oh, I beg your pardon. May I introduce my good friend, Mr. Darcy?" Mrs. Bennet smiled agreeably at the man she knew as the one that had 10,000 a year.
"You are very welcome to Hertfordshire, I am sure, sir. I hope you have come as eager to dance as your friend has."
Lizzie noticed Mr. Darcy showed nothing but disinterest to the lively room. "Thank you, Mom. I rarely dance." That did not surprise Lizzie. What did surprise her is that he came anyway. Mrs. Bennet was not one to back down.
"Well, let this be one of the occasions, for I wager you will not easily find such lively music."
She paused and turned slightly to Lizzie.
"Or such pretty partners."
Lizzie tensed a moment as she watched him. He said nothing to the offer. Lips stiffened a moment before he bowed sharply and walked away without uttering another word. He was gone by the time Mrs. Bennet turned from Lizzie, clearly disappointed neither of her daughters had tempted the wealthy gentleman. Lizzie, however, was relieved. It would be far easier to monitor the gentleman from afar. Mr. Bingley glanced behind him, alerted from the look of shock on Mrs. Bennet's face. He noticed his friend had left rudely, without a word, forcing him to mumble a quick, "Excuse me, ma'am," and rush to find his friend. Mrs. Bennet, however, could not resist letting her disappointment be known.
"Have you ever met such a proud, disagreeable man?"
Lizzie was not sure she had, at least not one that still insisted on attending gatherings he clearly did not enjoy. Her eyes narrowed. The man moved back toward Mr. Bingley's sisters. "Mamma, he will hear you," Lizzie warned, not to mention everyone else at the assembly.
"I do not care if he does. His friend is so agreeable and everything charming. Who is he to think himself so far above this company?"
Mrs. Bennet continued with her same tone and volume. Lizzie, for once, could not agree with Mrs. Bennet more. Well, the very rich can afford to give offence wherever they go. We need not care for his good opinion.
"Indeed not."
Lizzie narrowed her eyes and watched Mr. Darcy talk with Mr. Bingley's sisters. Perhaps he's not so handsome after all. Mrs. Bennet nodded sharply.
"No, indeed, he is nothing to Mr. Bingley."
Lizzie smiled that her theory seemed to have been confirmed. At least for one of them, his wealth did not make him unconditionally desirable or pleasing. Now she needed to determine whether either of their new neighbors were a threat to Jane. Lizzie moved to the back of the room, watching as Jane and Mr. Bingley danced, and subtly observed Mr. Darcy. She quietly avoided several offers to dance, as there were more important matters she needed to address this night. The first dance ended, and Mr. Bingley seemed unwilling to relinquish his time with Jane, guiding her to the refreshments until their second dance. Lizzie observed Mr. Bingley scan the room. His eyes settled on Mr. Darcy standing alone, as both Mr. Bingley's sisters were engaged in the next dance. Mr. Bingley whispered something to Jane, who nodded before he moved toward his lonely friend. Ah, what would they speak of during an intimate moment when no one would hear? Lizzie moved silently beyond the crowd, positioning discreetly behind the gentleman. "Come, Darcy, I must have you dance. I hate to see you standing around in this stupid manner," Mr. Bingley insisted. Lizzie could not understand how someone in such a lower station from Mr. Darcy could speak with him as such. Mr. Darcy clucked his tongue before he spoke. "I certainly will not, at an assembly such as this. It would be unsupportable." Mr. Bingley looked around the event, with eyes wide and smiling, seemingly not understanding Mr. Darcy's ill opinion. Mr. Darcy continued, "Your sisters are currently engaged. You know very well it would be a punishment to stand up with any other woman in the room." "Good God, Darcy, I wouldn't be as fastidious as you for a kingdom. Upon my honor, I've never met so many pleasant girls in my life. Several of them are uncommonly pretty." Mr. Darcy maintained the look of disdain that seemed permanent to his features. "You have been dancing with the only handsome girl in the room." Mr. Bingley's smile grew even larger. "She is the most beautiful woman I have ever beheld." The declaration, made at a time when neither believed they could be heard, was genuine. Lizzie groaned softly as Mr. Bingley glanced around the room. "Where is her sister? She is also very pretty, I dare say very agreeable." "She is merely tolerable and not nearly handsome enough to tempt me, nor have I seen her dance one dance all this event. I am in no humour to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men." "Return to your partner, enjoy her smiles. You are wasting your time with me." Mr. Darcy's jaw set, unyielding to his friend's admonitions. Mr. Bingley looked to say something more, but he saw Jane searching for him in the crowd and moved to her side for the next dance. The music started. All eyes turned to the dancers. Lizzie thought a moment. Mr. Bingley's affection toward Jane seemed genuine, but it disturbed her how Mr. Bingley addressed Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy's disregard for her appearance was more of a relief than the intended slight. That did not prevent her from using it to her advantage. How would he react to someone from her station showing some slight disrespect? She decided against moving away, and waited until he turned around. If she understood his actions from watching him that evening, he would soon bore of the spectacle that so enchanted everyone in the room, and turn away in 3, 2, 1. He turned. She locked eyes with him. The room, distracted by the dance and their situation at the far corner, offered a moment of privacy. He did not flinch, did not flush, was not embarrassed by his words, or ashamed. Lizzie didn't flinch either, kept his gaze, watched his reaction closely. Her head tilted as she watched him. "I would declare you a coward, sir, were it not for the assurance you have just shown me that you would have spoken the same words if you had known I was standing right behind you." He said no word, still no flush or regret in his gaze. Lizzie smiled. He was quickly becoming one of her favorite diversions. "I cannot fault you your preferences in a partner. Although I can scarce afford them, I do have my own, although mine fall more towards a man's character. Honesty, integrity, and compassion are what I wish to find in a marriage partner, so you need not worry. I will not pursue you in any way, as you do not rank very high with my preferences either." Finally, a slight flush to his cheeks. Jaw still set. He would not give any ground. He also did not show any agitation, did not voice any offense back, which she would have deserved and he could easily afford. The interaction was quite amusing, but provided a frustrating lack of useful information about the mysterious gentleman. Resigned to this mission's failure, she spotted Charlotte at the far end of the room. "Pray you would excuse me," she curtsied quickly and moved toward her friend. For the rest of the evening, Lizzie continued to watch the two gentlemen, seeing only the same behaviors that she had already established, and relented to accepting some of the offers to dance. The activity helped to relieve some of the frustration caused by her lack of progress, to either discount the new neighbors as not a threat, or confirming them as most definitely a threat. How long did Charlotte say they intended to stay? 2 seasons? Would she need to stay on high alert so long? The festivities lasted well into the evening, Mrs. Bennet unwilling to leave early, with Jane keeping company with Mr. Bingley. Finally, his party insisted on retiring for the evening, and all in attendance seemed to agree that was a good time. Upon returning to their home, Lizzie was relieved to see Mr. Bennet had returned from his visit to London. Hopefully, he had some intelligence that could allow her some progress with her main mission. She wasn't sure how many more nights such as these she could endure. Mr. Bennet was in the drawing-room, enjoying the solitude of reading, when all the Bennet girls descended upon him at once. The reports of the assembly from his wife and youngest daughters commenced, most at the same time. A detailed description of Mr. Bingley was given, even though Mr. Bennet was already acquainted with him, and they only confirmed the reports he had previously made. The disagreeable nature of his friend, their opinion of Mr. Bingley's sisters that at first seemed as disdainful as Mr. Darcy, but had become affectionate toward Jane after they spoke. Lizzie watched as he enjoyed the chaos around him, wondered how long before he would reach his limit. She found it came when Mrs. Bennet expressed her admiration for the lace on Mrs. Hurst's dress. "No lace, no lace, I implore you!" He finally relented to leaving the room. He called Jane and Lizzie to follow him. Once the door was closed to his study, Lizzie excitedly awaited his report. "Have they been able to locate the wealthy merchant?" Mr. Bennet sighed and sat heavily in his chair. "Yes, but he is proving to be less helpful than anticipated. He only knew 4 of the 5 conspirators, 3 of which we've already ascertained. He confirmed only 1 of the remaining 2. Lizzie tempered her disappointment. They still gained 1 name they didn't have previously. Now they needed to find a way to neutralize the threat. She would enjoy picking the method. "Who?" Lizzie asked softly. "We still need a secondary witness. You know this, Lizzie," Mr. Bennet reprimanded. Lizzie nodded, but glanced at his desk. New papers she hadn't seen before, his satchel by his chair. She would need to check both tonight when all were asleep. "Once we have confirmed the identity, we will create a plan, and if you are needed, we will let you know. Until your reinforcements arrive and are thoroughly informed, you have strict orders to completely stand down." Lizzie's eyes shot to Mr. Bennet, her temper causing her breathing to increase. "What reinforcements?" Jane placed her hand over Lizzie's to calm her, but it did not have the desired effect. "Jane's specialist agrees the dangers of this project are increasing. You barely completed the last campaign with your life intact. Additional assistance has been recommended for some time, and he feels he's found the perfect match to our cause." "Who?" The question came out louder and angrier than she would have wished. The news itself caused her great astonishment and agitation. "I do not know, but Jane's specialists advise they have been pulled from the nation's top agents." Mr. Bennet was quite relieved by the news. The safer he could keep Jane and dear Lizzie, the more content he would be. Looking upon Lizzie's countenance, he was certain she did not feel the same. "They are needed in France to counter Napoleon's attacks. I have been able to bring down 3 of the 5 on my own. I do not need reinforcements." Mr. Bennet leveled his eyes to her. "If you wish to stay on this task, you will wait for the reinforcements. That is an order. Do I make myself clear?" Lizzie blinked. Was she really in danger of being removed from a campaign for which she had devoted years of her life and training? No one knew as much about the situation as she did. She moved forward to make her feelings known. "Do not test me, Lizzie. Do I make myself clear?" Lizzie stilled, her mouth closed, and emotion made her eyes blink. Unwilling to test the man that clearly carried the power to remove her from the task she was desperate to complete, she nodded her head. Mr. Bennet nodded curtly, accepting her acquiescence and ready to dismiss them both. "Jane's specialist requested we visit. Can you arrange the carriage?" Mr. Bennet's eyes narrowed at his young charge. He had reviewed the request himself, but with the novelty of the new neighbors, he had assumed they would wish to delay it. "You do not wish to stay and watch the continuing spectacle of the Netherfield party?" Lizzie now had a more pressing matter to address, and it was in London. While Mr. Bennet was focused on ensuring Lizzie accepted the assistance that was so carefully arranged, she had approached Mr. Bennet's desk, sufficiently close to find the name she needed. I have determined the only threat the Netherfield party poses to Jane is Mr. Bingley's interest in securing her hand in as many dances as society will allow. Spending time in London will easily counter that attack. That is hardly necessary, Jane complained. Lizzie took her hand to quiet her friend. To her great relief, Jane did not continue her resistance. Mr. Bennet thought on the proposal a moment. I think you are right on your request. I will send word to Jane's specialist and arrange transport. Once we have confirmation from London, you may start your journey. Later that night, Jane interrogated Lizzie over her actions with Mr. Bennet. What are you planning, Lizzie? We are going to intercept the fourth man. I have intelligence that he is at least a sympathizer with Napoleon, and if reports are accurate, he is also one of his assets. If I can get confirmation of this in front of someone your specialist trusts, he will be stripped of his lands and his life for treason. I would not have to dispatch him myself. Lizzie was readying her things to leave as soon as possible. But father said we had to wait for confirmation. Jane resisted. They already have the needed confirmation. The page contained the seal. I believe father would prefer the reinforcements handle this one. I saw the recommendation as part of the dispatch for those plans. Lizzie did not entertain Jane's suggestion. I think father is very wise and we should respect his judgment. Jane continued her resistance. I have worked to keep you safe since stepping onto English soil. No one understands the complexities of your circumstance or the resources possessed by those who wish to take you better than I. No matter how skilled or well trained the reinforcements might be, I have not been consulted. Without at the very least my assistance, we risk the fourth man being alerted to our pursuit and escaping with minimal chance of finding him again until it is too late. Lizzie witnessed Jane's countenance change with the understanding of Lizzie's counsel. We also run the risk of alerting him and allowing his escape, she continued to counter. Lizzie shook her head. I know him. He is one that we have already suspected, and I have ascertained his habits. He attends Madame Claude's rooms every Thursday. Jane's eyes widened as she comprehended Lizzie's information. Oh, I believe that will work. Lizzie smiled. I believe it will as well. I need to dispatch a letter to Jean-Luc. This may take the assistance of some of our assets in France, but worth the collaboration to remove one more threat within a fortnight. At Netherfield, the conversation between Mr. Bingley, his sisters, brother-in-law, and best friend centered around the time passed at the assembly. All agreed that Jane was a lovely girl with an uncommonly sweet countenance, and they would be sure to request the honor of her company once they were settled in their new home. Mr. Bingley energetically declared she was an angel. Mr. Darcy's only criticism, he could determine, was that she smiled too much. They also were agreeable to each other's conclusions that Jane's mother had shown a disgraceful lack of decorum by loudly disparaging Mr. Darcy's actions and asserting that Mr. Bingley preferred her daughter over all other girls in the room. Any acquaintance they would arrange with Jane would carefully exclude her mother. Opinions about Lizzie, however, were decidedly mixed. Upon Caroline declaring her astonishment at Miss Elizabeth Bennet being reported as a local beauty, she asked Mr. Darcy if he did not agree. He responded, I should as soon call her mother a wit. Both sisters laughed. Mr. Bingley did not. He watched his friend, noted his deportment as being quite singular when he spoke of the woman who had been slighted by other men. He did not look at the others when he voiced the slight of her. He merely gazed at the hearth and poked at the fire. His friend was lying.